Elvis Presley died at just 42 years old, but nobody talks about the one thing he was most afraid of. On August 16, 1977, the phone rings at Linda Thompson's house. 9-year-old Lisa Marie Presley is crying on the other end. "My daddy's dead. My daddy's dead." Linda can't believe it. No, he's not. But Lisa Marie knows something the world doesn't know yet. "They told me he's dead. He's on the carpet." Linda throws the phone across the room. The king of rock and roll is gone, but his biggest secret is about to tear his family apart. Here's what nobody understood back then. Elvis had told his family something years before he died. Something so important that his father Vernon would spend every penny trying to make it happen. Something so scary to Elvis that he mentioned it over and over again to anyone who would listen. Nancy Rooks worked as Elvis's housekeeper for 10 years. She lived at Graceland. She saw everything. She heard everything. And she kept Elvis's biggest secret until she wrote her book decades later. Nancy Rooks wasn't just any employee. She was part of the family. For 10 years, from 1967 to 1977, she cleaned the rooms, served the meals, and listened to the conversations that shaped the Presley family's most important decisions. She was there when Elvis laughed. She was there when Elvis cried. And she was there when Elvis talked about his biggest fear. The fear that would haunt his father forever. The secret Nancy revealed was simple but shocking. Elvis Presley was terrified of being buried underground. Not scared, terrified. Elvis had always said that he did not want to be buried in the ground, Nancy wrote in her book. This wasn't something he mentioned once or twice. Nancy heard him say it many times. His friends heard it. His family heard it. Elvis Presley, the man who performed in front of millions of people, was afraid of being put in the ground when he died. Think about this for a second. The king of rock and roll, who seemed fearless on stage, who could handle any crowd, who lived the biggest life imaginable, had one simple fear that kept him awake at night. He didn't want to be buried in dirt. He wanted to be placed above ground, in a tomb where he could rest in peace without being covered by soil. This fear was so real to Elvis that he talked about it constantly with the people closest to him. When Elvis died, his father Vernon was destroyed. But Vernon remembered what his son had asked for. Despite his grief, despite the chaos, despite everything falling apart around him, Vernon had one mission. He was going to honor Elvis's final wish. Vernon immediately bought a crypt at Forest Hill Cemetery in Memphis. This was the same cemetery where Elvis's mother Gladys was buried 19 years earlier. Vernon had Elvis placed in an above-ground tomb in the Forest Hill Mausoleum, exactly what Elvis had wanted. But Vernon didn't stop there. He wanted to keep the family together. So he had Gladys's body moved from her hillside grave to a crypt right below Elvis, inside the mausoleum. For the first time since Gladys died in 1958, mother and son were together again. Elvis was above ground, just like he wanted. Vernon had done it. He had honored his son's dying wish. The king was at peace, exactly where he wanted to be. Then everything went wrong. Less than 2 weeks after Elvis died, Memphis police discovered something horrible. Criminals were planning to steal Elvis's body and demand money from his family to get it back. These weren't just rumors or threats. This was a real plan by real criminals, who saw Elvis's death as an opportunity to make money from his family's grief. Vernon faced an impossible choice. Keep Elvis where he wanted to be, and risk losing his body to criminals, or move him somewhere safe and break the promise he had made to his dying son. Vernon was heartbroken. He had promised Elvis he would never be buried in the ground. He had spent money the family didn't have to buy that above-ground crypt. He had moved Gladys to be with her son, and now he had to choose between keeping his promise and protecting his son's body. There was no good choice. Every option meant breaking his heart a little more. Vernon made a decision that still haunts the Presley family today. On October 2, 1977, just 5 weeks after Elvis died, Vernon had both Elvis and Gladys moved to Graceland. But here's the part that destroyed Vernon inside. He couldn't afford to build the beautiful above-ground tomb that Elvis deserved at Graceland. The family was broke. The estate was a mess. Vernon had gotten price quotes for building a proper mausoleum, and the cost was impossible. There simply wasn't enough money to build what Elvis had dreamed of. Vernon had another problem too. An above-ground tomb at Graceland would be easy for criminals to break into. A grave in the ground would be much harder to disturb. So Vernon made the hardest decision of his life. He decided to bury Elvis in the ground at Graceland, the exact thing Elvis had begged never to happen. Vernon knew he was breaking his promise to his son, but he also knew it was the only way to keep Elvis safe and bring him home. The process of preparing Graceland for Elvis's burial was incredibly difficult. Vernon had to get permission from the city to bury people on the property. This took time, and every day Vernon worried about Elvis's safety. "Nancy, they don't seem to understand. I need to bring my son and his mama home," Vernon told Nancy Rooks. You can hear the pain in those words. A father desperate to protect his son, even in death. Vernon planned the burial site in Graceland's meditation garden, near the swimming pool where Elvis loved to spend time. Vernon designed the area to hold 4 graves: Elvis, Gladys, himself, and his mother Minnie Mae. The whole family would be together forever, but Elvis would be in the ground, the one thing he never wanted. The second funeral at Graceland was completely different from Elvis's first funeral. Only close family and friends were invited. The service started at 7 p.m. on a quiet October evening. Earlier that day, workers had dug deep holes for the burial vaults. Nancy Rooks looked down into Elvis's grave before the service started. "I cannot explain what an eerie feeling it was staring into that open vault knowing that was where Elvis was soon to be placed," she wrote. Even she could feel how wrong this was. The funeral was short and simple. Vernon, his sister Delta, and his mother Minnie Mae sat in folding chairs between the graves and the swimming pool. 2 white horses and 2 cars brought Elvis and Gladys home to Graceland for the last time. Vernon kept the service brief because the family had already been through too much pain. They needed this to be over. They needed peace. Even at this sad moment, Vernon was thinking about Elvis's twin brother Jesse, who died when they were born. Vernon tried to find Jesse's grave so he could bring him to Graceland too, but after all these years, nobody knew where Jesse was buried. Vernon had a memorial plaque made for Jesse anyway, so Elvis's twin would be remembered at Graceland. Vernon also moved the Jesus statue and angels from Gladys's old grave to Graceland, keeping the family's spiritual symbols together. In 1978, Vernon made a decision that showed he understood Elvis's connection to his fans. He opened the meditation garden to the public for free. From 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. every day, anyone could visit Elvis's grave without paying anything. This tradition continues today, though the hours are now 7:30 to 8:30 a.m. for free visits. Vernon knew that Elvis belonged to his fans as much as he belonged to his family, and he wanted to keep that connection alive. Vernon died in 1979, just 2 years after Elvis. He was buried in the meditation garden just as he had planned. Minnie Mae died in 1980 and joined them. For 40 years, the meditation garden was quiet, holding just these 4 family members. But tragedy would bring the family back to this sacred place. In 2020, Benjamin Keough, Elvis's grandson, died by suicide at age 27. Benjamin was Lisa Marie's son, and his death shattered the family. Here's something interesting though. Benjamin was buried above ground at Graceland. After all these years, the family remembered Elvis's original wish and gave his grandson the burial that Elvis had wanted for himself. The grandson got what the grandfather had asked for but never received. 3 years later, in January 2023, Lisa Marie Presley died suddenly at age 54. She had just been to the Golden Globe Awards supporting the new Elvis movie, and then she was gone. Lisa Marie was buried right next to her son Benjamin in the meditation garden. Elvis's only child was now resting next to her father, continuing the family tradition that Vernon had started. But the biggest surprise was yet to come. Priscilla Presley, Elvis's ex-wife, has secured the right to be buried at Graceland too. This happened through a complicated legal battle that was settled in 2023 and approved by a judge in 2024. When Lisa Marie died, there were questions about who would control Elvis's estate. Priscilla challenged some legal documents, but eventually agreed to let Elvis's granddaughter Riley Keough take full control of Graceland and the estate. As part of this agreement, Priscilla got something very valuable. She received $1 million up front and $100,000 every year for the rest of her life. But more importantly, she got the promise that she would be buried at Graceland, closest to Elvis Presley, without moving any existing grave site. This means when 80-year-old Priscilla dies, she will be buried closer to Elvis than anyone else in the garden. Many fans wonder why Elvis's ex-wife gets this honor, but it makes sense when you think about it. Priscilla's daughter Lisa Marie is buried there. Her grandson Benjamin is buried there. Riley Keough, who now owns Graceland, supported this decision because it keeps the family together. The legal settlement also ensures that Graceland stays in family hands and that family fights don't destroy Elvis's legacy. Today, the meditation garden is one of America's most visited burial sites.
Hundreds of thousands of people visit every year to pay respects to the king. The garden holds 6 graves now: Elvis, his parents Vernon and Gladys, his grandmother Minnie May, his daughter Lisa Marie, and his grandson Benjamin. Soon it will hold Priscilla too, completing a story that started with Vernon's impossible choice. Here's the most important part of this whole story. Elvis Presley, who could control everything in his life, couldn't control his own death. His biggest fear came true despite his father's best efforts. The king of rock and roll, who gave millions of people what they wanted, didn't get what he wanted when he died. He's buried in the ground at Graceland, exactly what he was afraid of. But maybe Vernon made the right choice after all. By bringing Elvis home to Graceland and making his grave accessible to fans, Vernon created something special. The meditation garden isn't just a cemetery. It's a place where Elvis's connection to his fans continues forever. Millions of people have visited Elvis's grave, felt close to him, and found comfort in being near the king. Maybe this is better than the private above-ground tomb Elvis originally wanted. The story of Elvis's burial teaches us something important about love and family. Sometimes loving someone means making choices that hurt. Vernon loved Elvis so much that he tried everything to honor his son's wishes. When circumstances made that impossible, Vernon made the hard choice to protect Elvis instead. That's what real love looks like, doing what's necessary even when it breaks your heart. Nancy Rooks's revelation about Elvis's burial wishes also reminds us that there's still so much we don't know about the real Elvis Presley. Behind all the fame and music and legend, Elvis was a man with real fears and real feelings. He worried about things that regular people worry about. He had preferences that mattered to him. The fact that he was afraid of being buried underground makes him more human, more relatable, more real. The recent family settlements show that the Presley legacy continues to evolve. Riley Keough now owns Graceland and has the responsibility of protecting Elvis's memory for future generations. Her decision to allow Priscilla to be buried there, despite their legal fights, shows maturity and family loyalty that Elvis would have appreciated. The meditation garden will continue to grow as a place where the Presley family rests together. Elvis Presley's burial story is ultimately about the price of fame and the power of family love. It shows us that even the most famous person in the world was someone's son, someone's father, someone's family member with hopes and fears that mattered deeply. Vernon Presley's struggle to honor his son's wishes while protecting him shows us how love sometimes requires impossible choices. In the end, Elvis may not have gotten the burial he requested, but he got something more valuable. He got to come home to Graceland, and he got to stay connected to the people who love him. Every day fans from around the world visit his grave, remember his music, and feel close to the king. In a world where fame often separates artists from their audiences, Elvis's grave creates a bridge that will last forever. And maybe, just maybe, that's exactly what the king would have wanted after all.